On the Road with Kelly and Bob, the USA 250 Tour, celebrating America. Coming up on this episode.
In Mississippi, I think it has to do with a storytelling tradition among common folk, if you will, and a history, particular history, and one colored by defeat in the Civil War.
We, the people of the United States of America.
Hi, and thanks for joining us for this episode of On the Road with Kelly and Bob. I'm Bob Phillips.
And I'm Kelly Phillips. Pretty much for the entire time that has elapsed since our forefathers signed the Declaration of Independence until today, people in our country have been attempting to write the great American novel.
And the guy you're about to meet says maybe, just maybe, it's already been written. Only time will tell.
One thing for sure, though, many of those authors who would be on the list of those that presumably might write such a book have passed through a particular place in Oxford, Mississippi.
I was born in Marks, Mississippi, which is about 50 miles from here, and which some people will know, and a few recall that it was where the Poor People's March started. In 1968. King and the organizers wanted to start it there because Quitman County, where Marks is, was then and probably still is to some extent the poorest per capita county in the nation. That's why they started Poor People's March there. My father went there as a doctor when he got out of the Navy, and it was close to here, for one thing, which is where my mother was born. My mother was born in Oxford. Her parents lived here. All of her aunts, uncles lived here.
That's Richard Howarth. He wasn't born here, but he's from just down the road. And you'd be hard-pressed to find anyone who reflects what Oxford is all about more than Richard.
Well, hard-pressed to find anyone still living, that is. There is one person who has for decades been identified with this place, and Richard grew up just across the street from that person's home. It's a person whose name you might have heard.
So he moved to Oxford in 1963 and lived in a house that was directly across the street from Faulkner's home. I never knew Faulkner. A lot of people in my family did. One of my uncles, great uncles, was his doctor, and my great aunt was very close to his wife and close to him. She had a dinner party at one point, so that she was also friends with Eudora Welty. So she had Eudora Welty come and had Faulkner come. That was when they first met. And my mother's father was a literature professor here at the university, taught for almost 60 years. And so those are kind of some of my book bones, I guess.
And that would be William Cuthbert Faulkner, the American writer from Mississippi that won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1949. He later lived in Oxford, and Richard Howarth grew up just across the street from Faulkner's home.
And that had a profound effect on Richard Howarth. Even as a little boy, he noticed how many people flocked to that house across the street. People from all over the world.
When I was a teenager, when I was a young teenager, this oldest brother of mine said, we ought to open a bookstore here one day. The idea was been planted long ago.
Did that have anything to do with growing up across Faulkner's house?
Well, certainly the notion that one of the most famous writers of the world.
Did you see people coming and going to this house?
Yes. We could see people pulling up in the driveway at Roanoke to try to visit the house. Now, soon after he died, the house was not open to visitors, but before long it opened, and I believe the university, I'm not sure exactly when, but the university bought the home from the family so that they could establish it as a house museum, which was a good thing to do.
Tell us about Faulkner, who he was, and
Why he was so important.
yes, the importance of this guy.
He had to be genius, I think, because he started very young, started writing very young, very earnestly, almost as if possessed. He had a brilliant imagination that he combined with actuality in terms of history and places and events, and created an immensely broad palette of stories with all kinds of memorable characters. He created a saga, if you will, of the South in this particular place over a broad period of time, predating the Civil War and up to relatively, for him, contemporary times. Had the respect of critics and scholars alike. About 30 books, novels, and stories that if you read them, you see that, genius kind of come out. The phrasing, the storytelling aspects, all just, brilliant.
And William Faulkner is by no means the only famous writer from Mississippi.
What is it about Oxford?
What is it?
Well, I don't know about Oxford per se, at least, certainly in his time, but in Mississippi, I think there's scholars and critics have written about this all over the place, but it has to do with a storytelling tradition among common folk, if you will, and a history, particular history, and one colored by defeat in the Civil War. An attachment to family maybe has a lot to do with it. There are a lot of family sagas that have come out of Mississippi writers. I said a storytelling tradition.
Remember what Richard said about his brother suggesting they someday open a bookstore here in Oxford? Well, Richard did just that, not with his brother, but with the love of his life, Lisa.
And since 1979, Square Books, right here in Little Oxford, Mississippi, has been on every publisher's and avid reader's list of important American bookstores.
In fact, Square Books is to authors what Texas is to country music. If you're going to make it in the business, you have to come through Oxford. Even the really famous, like John Grisham, who doesn't need the publicity, still makes time to come to Square Books.
We'd have people lined up down the street for a signing. It was going to begin at 10 o'clock in the morning. They'd get here at 4 a.m. or 2 a.m. the night before, bring a blanket and sleep out on the sidewalk in order to be in line.
To get 30 seconds with John Grisham. Has the great American novel, is it yet to be written, or has it been that we just haven't labeled it? Is there such a thing?
Oh, absolutely. A great American novel appears several times a year. Now you're going to ask me to name them, but now I'm not sure that I can. I think it takes a while for a book to be deemed a great American novel. Even one that's very popular immediately upon publication. There's a great American novel there's a certain canon that exists today, and it may change over time. And so, I don't know. Don't ask me complicated questions.
Okay, a couple of things. First, put Oxford, Mississippi on your must-visit list. You'll love the town square, and Ole Miss is one of the most beautiful campuses anywhere.
And definitely set aside time to come to visit Square Books. Keep in mind there are 4 Square Books locations on the square in Oxford. Each one has different kinds of books, so this might take you a little while, especially if you are an avid reader.
Let's get back into the conversation with Richard Howarth, and I want to start with more on the incredible love story between Richard and Lisa. It reads a little bit like a novel itself.
Graduated from Oxford High School in 1968, went to the University of Mississippi.
You're an Oxford boy.
It was close by.
You could walk.
So I went to Ole Miss. I graduated in 4 years. And the summer after I graduated, I was kind of hanging around here. A buddy of mine and I we wanted to get out of here. I wanted to get out of here because I'd been here basically my whole life. And his sister lived in Portland, Oregon. And we thought we'd go out. She had a basement that we could stay in. We thought we'd go out there, find work, hang around. And so we did. Right before I left Oxford to go to Portland, a bunch of my friends were living in a big house. It was called the Big House. And there were about 10 of them in there. It was just summer of 72. There was a lot of culture going on there.
It's a nice way of putting it.
And right before I left, about a week before my buddy and I left to go to Portland, I met a young woman over at the Big House one day. She was wearing beads and got here in a Volkswagen bus
And had flowers in her.
not quite, but yeah, it was close. And so I'd fallen for this girl, and I was about to leave her to leave the place I'd been for so many years. And so the night before I left, I made a written declaration. When my buddy and I got up to leave the next day, on the windshield of the car at my parents' house where I was staying then was a letter, obviously from her, and it was just stuck behind the windshield wiper. And I showed it to my buddy, and I said, I'm not opening this until we get 3 states away. I was afraid of all kinds of things. But we got to Missouri, and I opened it, and it was reciprocal. So we corresponded when I was in Portland, and through those letters came to love each other, and we got married. We lived together for, I don't know, maybe a year, and then got married on New Year's Eve in 1973. That's how Lisa and I got together. During the time we were together, the idea of a bookstore was always in our minds, but we were just trying to get on our feet, financially. And so she got accepted into the library science program at Chapel Hill, University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. We moved up there, and she did that for a year. And while we were there, we visited her family in D.C., and we always went to a bookstore in Georgetown called the Saville Bookshop. And so finally, we were in there one day. We hadn't left Chapel Hill, but I asked the manager there if we could work there. And she said, well, actually the owner does all the hiring, and he lives in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. So we went back to Chapel Hill, and I went to the Intimate Bookshop and introduced myself to Wallace Corral, who told me, he said, well, we don't really have any spots at the store right now. He said, but, check with me later or something. I'll see you later. Something, I don't know. It was very indefinite. And I hadn't told him that my ultimate object was to open a bookstore here in Oxford, because I was afraid he might come here and open one himself. And
this is Wallace Corral.
This is Wallace.
Charles's brother.
Charles's brother. I'm sorry. Yes, I didn't say that. And so I finally said, well, I'm thinking about opening a bookstore in Oxford. I told him that. So he hired us, and we worked there, I don't know, for a year, and then he made us the co-managers of the store. And that was at the time Crown Books was opening in Washington. There was pressure from the chains. They had a full-page ad in the back of the Washington Post book world every week. If you didn't buy your book from Crown Books, you paid too much. And it was really tough, because you could tell. I mean, none of the signs were good. I got great experience. There's no better experience in business than to work for one that's failing. Yeah. And that's what we were doing.
As somebody said to me one time, college professor said, to know Faulkner isn't necessarily to love Faulkner. Are you a Faulkner fan? You sell his books, I know.
Oh, yeah. Well, I certainly admire what he's done, but I'm not quite as avid as Lisa is. She's read more of it than I have. And a lot of people come here still because of him.
Was he the first of the great writers from Oxford, Mississippi?
No, actually, there was a fellow named Stark Young, who was a playwright and a novelist, wrote a novel, So Red the Rose, that was very popular in its day. I think he was eight or so years older than Faulkner, enough older so they weren't exactly contemporaries. But I think, if nothing else, Faulkner saw in Stark Young a model of success, someone who could write a book and people would read it and buy it.
And maybe I can do this.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
And Faulkner was by no means the last writer from here.
There were a lot of writers from Greenville, Mississippi. William Alexander Percy was kind of among the pioneers there, and there were youngsters growing up there who saw him as a model, notably Shelby Foote and Walker Percy, his nephew, William Alexander Percy's nephew, and others, Josephine Haxton, whose pen name was Ellen Douglas, and there's places like Natchez have this rich legend part of the country and worthy of, documentation and imitation.
This bookstores, I should say, here on the square in Oxford, Mississippi, is pretty famous, especially for the authors that have come here to sign their books.
John Grisham, his first
book signing is right here in your store.
Right.
Ever.
Right. With this particular store, it has to do with the fact that book signings is something that we've always tried to do. We started out doing that in D.C. We knew there were writers in Washington that some affiliated with the Post, but others. James Dickey was living in Alexandria, Virginia when we were there, and we got him to come in. Art Buchwald, the great columnist for the Washington Post, he had a book that came out while we were there. We got him to come in and sign that book. It was he, by the way, came in the store and he was smoking a cigar. And in those days, you could smoke indoors places. And he came in with a cigar and signing books. And I asked him to sign a book for my mother, who was an Art Buchwald fan. And how did he do this? He put the cigar in his hand and was holding the book and the cigar in one hand while he signed the book. And I started laughing, and the signature in the book is for Richard's mother. Why is he laughing?
He didn't catch it on fire.
Yeah. Larry McMurtry lived there, and he did not want to do an advertised signing. When he had a book come out, he was happy to come there and sign stop for us, which is no. I think he was always shy. So it was something that we certainly tried to do here. And first writer we had was Ellen Douglas, who had been sorority sister of my mother's at the university here, and she had a book that came out the month after we opened, and I wrote her a note and asked her if she would do it. She would come up and sign books, and she came. The book was called The Rock Cried Out, and I ordered 50 copies, which was a big buy for me at that point. I remember we were upstairs over there, had to get people to come up those steps and buy the book, and we advertised the event, and a lot of people came, and the pile started dwindling, and I knew that if I sold out of books, she was gonna say, you could have sold a lot more books if you ordered full books, but there was one book left.
Lucky you.
It was a perfect order.
I was just sitting, looking at that book, saying, "Please don't buy that book. Please don't buy." She was so nice. And another key thing in the early days was the Center for the Study of Southern Culture opened at the university right about the same time that we had opened the bookstore, and they had hired their first full-time director, a guy named Bill Ferris, who was originally from Vicksburg, Mississippi, and he had been to Yale, and he had studied folklore, and that was kind of his special area. Bill was charismatic, smart, and a lovely friend. He had just been the director for this other folklore center in Memphis, and his special area of special interest was African American folklore. So he knew a lot of black writers. So the second writer was a poet, Etheridge Knight, who was originally from Corinth, Mississippi. That was our second signing. We opened in September, and by Christmas we had 3 book signings. And so we continued to try to write people, and mostly, again, writers from Mississippi who had some kind of Mississippi connection. Sometime within that first year that we were open, Willie Morris appeared from the Yazoo City, Mississippi. He was living in Texas at the time.
Yeah.
He had a big Texas connection with the University of Texas, and Willie came up the stairs one day and introduced himself. And he said, "Richard, I'm gonna move here." And I said, "Well, okay, good." And he said, "I'm gonna bring my friends. They're all gonna do book signings here." Then he started talking about David Halberstam and James Dickey, and I said, good. I didn't quite believe it, but I said, great.
Thought it was Texas bragging.
Yeah, something. And so Willie became an enormous asset to the bookstore in terms. A lot of those people he attracted to the university. They did meetings or speeches or whatever on campus, and then did a book signing at a store.
As the owner of a bookstore, do you get to be friends with any of these authors? Can you call up John Grisham and say, hey, when are you going to come sign, your next book?
I can't, but I don't.
You don't?
No, John calls me. For his first, 15 books or so, we did the signing every book, and it got to be more than we or he can handle that. It would go on for 12, 14 hours.
I can imagine, yeah.
And he was generous with people. It was hard. And so, but then after we, did this in-person signing, you would also sign stock. That would last for quite a while. And so that's what he continues to do today, bless his heart. He signs, I won't say how many, but it's a lot. It's a large number of books.
Are guys like that, we'll use John Grisham as an example, are they obsessed with getting these stories out? Because let's face it, he doesn't need it. So many the guy's had movies made from several of his books.
He holds the record, which I think he broke a couple of books ago, for most consecutive #1 New York Times bestsellers. Maybe he's afraid, he'll fall apart if he misses or something. I don't know. All I can say is I'm glad he continues to write.
Yeah, and so am I.
And I enjoy his books.
I do too.
I was going to ask, do you like books? You're the owner of the bookstore.
I like books. I like John's books. He sends me an early copy every book, and I read it before it's published every day.
Well, lucky.
Yeah.
So what happens if I get to be your friend? Do I get in on that or
no?
No.
Okay, another thing I've got to ask. You open a bookstore, but you have multiple bookstores
Aren't you in
relatively in walking distance
one
to
right
each
there,
other.
One right there. What's the deal with all the bookstores all around the square here?
Well, it started this way. We started upstairs over there. I knew I had to get on the ground floor as soon as I could. It took 6 or 7 years for that to happen, but this location became available, and I was able to buy the building from the family. One of the things, we kept having these book signings, and we kept having readings. And when we had a reading, we would have people stand behind the counter, and the people were all up and down the staircase, and then all over the ground floor. And basically, we didn't have enough room for a lot of readings, and we had to, the whole time somebody was reading a whole bunch of poems, the register was off. So we were not selling books at that point.
It kind of defeats the purpose.
Well, right, exactly. So I kept trying to find a better venue. A couple of times our friends in the courthouse let us use the courtroom for some things, but I knew I couldn't depend on that. So I was looking really for another location as a venue for readings more than anything. And I found what was then Denton's Furniture Store down the street, about 5 doors down from this building. It was a big old building, tall ceilings, wooden ceiling, wooden floors, 2 skylights, really cool neon in the window that said Denton's Furniture Store. We were able to rent that building. One of the things I did when I was trying to find this location in the process, and in my first location, I went all around the square asking, hey, I don't mean to encourage you to go out of business, but
But if you do, will you call me first?
Is this, or do you know of any other places on the square that might be available? And at that time, the commerce was not nearly as active as it is here, as it is today. But family had been in the same business for like 3 generations, and they just weren't going anywhere. And that was the way a lot of the retail was on the square. So we opened the off-square books down there off the square in 92. And then in 2003, we opened Square Books Junior over there, the children's store. In 2007, we moved off Square Books from Mr. Benton's Furniture Store to where Off Square Books is today. thus the name Off Square Books, but it's on the square. So the name doesn't make sense now, but
It doesn't have to.
right. It's a little off-brand, a little off-price. You know, we stuck with the
A
off.
little off.
We
Okay.
still got remainders down there, but we also moved all of our cookbooks and lifestyle books and gardening, and a lot of that was moved from this store to that store to give more room and more appeal there and more room here.
So how many bookstores total do you have?
So they're
Do you
technically
know?
4.
Technically 4.
What is it about this town that attracts people?
The square is, charming. It's lively. There are a lot of restaurants and bars, and a lot of activity. The university is frequently recognized as one of the most beautiful campuses in the nation. The cemetery is actually kind of lovely. It's a pedestrian-friendly town, and people here are nice, polite. It's a small town. You can't get away with not being nice, or if you do, you're gonna have a reputation.
Pay the price.
That's right. Pay the price.
I sense a nostalgia for the way it used to be. Am I wrong there?
Well, I think, a lot of people who read books, have a passing fancy of opening a bookstore one day.
Yeah, of course they do.
And there are a lot of communities that, whether they're in a large city or a small town, that can be served by an independent.
So you think they're on the rise now again? They're coming back.
They have been. They are and have been for several years now.
Why are your stores so special? But have you not created a certainly atmosphere in your stores that is people free?
Well, they're in these old buildings. It's on the town square. I still got the Fortune's ice cream sign that was on the building when it was a drugstore, and they sold Fortune's ice cream, and I don't now. And you still get people coming in asking where the ice cream is. I'm going to take that damn ice cream sign down.
Wait a minute. Are you telling me now, this deep into the interview, you don't have ice cream?
We don't.
We're out of here. Why do you think we really came in?
At one time we did. This used to be the Square Books Cafe. There weren't so many other cafes around, so we kind of had that business. My sister-in-law ran that. We had soups and sandwiches for lunches, and we kind of had a going thing, which was put me in the food business where I never really wanted to be.
One of the things that I've noticed is in your stores, you've got little areas where people can sit, they can greet, they can stop and pause for the day.
Is that important in these kinds of
Yeah, sure. A lot of our customers are older people. I get it. Sometimes you want to sit down. Sometimes you want to pick out 6 books and sit down with them and look through them in order to decide what you want to purchase.
You don't care if people do that, right?
No, of
You
course
won't-
not.
What is it about books that you love?
They take you to another world, and it may be the world that's been previously inhabited. It may be a speculative world of the future. It may be a world of a family or main character that you appreciate at one level or another. You either love them or hate them, or but you're curious about what's going to happen. And you also are enchanted by language many times. Certain writers, certain talent, and can use words in unique ways. And that's infinite variety of expressions and ideas. And
Can you still get lost in a good book?
certainly, I can get lost in a bad book.
It's hard to talk about American literature without talking about William Faulkner. His influence didn't just shape how Southern stories were told, it reshaped how American literature understood time, memory, and community. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of On the Road with Kelly and Bob, the USA 250 Tour. Our travels continue next week as we visit yet another state finding a story of significance. You don't want to miss a mile of our journey, so follow and like us on Facebook and Instagram, and check out the video we post on our YouTube page. You can listen to On the Road with Kelly and Bob wherever you get your podcast, or download that free Odyssey app. Listen anytime, anywhere.